Captain Lee Taman stared at the strange signal on his ship's screen. The UES Defiance had been exploring the edge of known space for 3 months, but nothing like this had ever appeared before. The signal was weak and broken, like someone crying for help from very far away. "Dr. Park, what do you think?" Taman asked the woman sitting next to him. Dr. Park Minji was the smartest person on his ship. She studied old alien ruins and understood things that most people could not. Minji looked at the data carefully. Her dark eyes moved quickly as she read the numbers. "This is not normal, Captain. The signal is coming from a dead star system. Nothing should be alive there." Commander Kim Dong-yun walked over to them. He was a big man with scars on his hands from old battles on Earth. Kim always worried about danger, which made him good at keeping the crew safe. "Captain, I don't like this. Dead systems don't send signals." Taman nodded, but made his choice. "We go anyway, someone needs help out there." He turned to the young pilot. "Hyeri, set course for the signal." Pilot Officer Choi Hyeri was only 22 years old, but she could fly the ship better than anyone. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls. "Course set, Captain. It will take us 6 hours to reach the system." The journey felt long and quiet. The crew worked at their stations, but everyone seemed nervous. They were going to a place where no life should exist. As they got closer, the ship's computers showed them what the system looked like. 5 dead planets circled a cold, dark star. Nothing grew on any of them. "There," Minji said, pointing at the 3rd planet. "The signal comes from there." They landed, on a world covered in gray dust and broken rocks. The air was too thin to breathe, so they wore special suits. Taman led a small team away from the ship. With him went Minji, Kim, and 2 other crew members. The planet felt wrong. It was too quiet, too empty. They walked for an hour before they found the ruins. Ancient buildings made of black stone rose from the dust like broken teeth. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing with a weak blue light. "These are old," Minji whispered. "Maybe millions of years old." They found the source of the signal in the largest building. Inside, several tall beings lay on the ground. Their bodies looked like they were made of crystal and light. Most were already dead, but one still moved weakly. The dying being looked at them with eyes like stars. When it spoke, the words appeared in their minds, not their ears. "You came," it said. "I am Kethmore of the Villani. We tried to warn everyone, but we were too late." Taman knelt beside the creature. "What happened here? What were you trying to warn us about?" "The Void Swarm wakes," Kethmore said. Its voice grew weaker. "Ancient hunger from the dark between stars. It devoured my people first because we lived close to its prison." Minji recorded everything the alien said. She had heard stories of the Void Swarm before, but most people thought they were just scary tales told to children. "The Guardian sealed it away long ago," Kethmore continued. "But the seal grows weak. The swarm will eat all life in the galaxy unless the Guardians return." "Who were these Guardians?" Kim asked. The dying alien tried to point to the symbols on the walls. "The answers are here. Learn quickly. The swarm already knows you have come." Kethmore's light faded and went out. The last Villani was dead. Minji worked quickly to copy the symbols from the walls. Her computer helped her translate the ancient language. What she read made her hands shake. "Captain," she said quietly, "these symbols describe the Guardians. They tell us what kind of beings could fight the Void Swarm." "What do they say?" Minji read from her computer. "The Guardians were warriors born from conflict. Their minds were strong from facing many battles. They felt emotions deeply: love, anger, hope, fear. Their life energy burned bright and hot like young stars." Kim looked around the empty ruins. "Where are they now?" "Gone," Minji said. "The text says they sacrificed themselves to build the prison that holds the Void Swarm." Suddenly, their ship's radio crackled with Hyeri's voice. "Captain, something is coming. My computers show strange readings all around us." They ran back toward their ship, but the sky above them began to change. Dark shapes moved between the stars like oil floating on water. The shapes had no real form, but looking at them made everyone feel cold and afraid. "Move faster," Kim shouted. The shadows reached down toward the planet. Where they touched the ground, the dust turned black and empty. The shadows were trying to drain the life from everything around them. The team reached their ship just as the first shadow creature landed, near them. It looked like a hole cut out of reality, with red eyes that burned like dying suns. The creature moved toward them, and Taman felt something horrible trying to pull the life out of his body. But then something strange happened. The shadow creature stopped moving. It made a sound like screaming and pulled back from the humans. Its burning eyes looked confused and afraid. "What's happening?" Yeri asked over the radio. Kim fired his weapon at the creature. The energy blast hit it and the shadow dissolved like smoke. "That shouldn't have worked," he said. "Our weapons aren't meant to hurt things like this." More shadow creatures appeared, but they all stayed away from the humans. They circled the ship like hungry animals that were afraid to attack. "Get us out of here," Taman ordered. Yeri started the ship's engines. As they lifted off the planet, the shadow creatures tried to follow them. But something about the ship's human crew seemed to hurt them. The creatures fell back, making awful screaming sounds. Once they were safe in space, Minji continued working on the ancient text. Hours later, she found the last part of the message. Her face went white as she read it. "Captain," she said in a whisper, "I know why those creatures were afraid of us. Tell me." Minji looked at the words on her screen one more time to make sure she had translated them correctly. The text describes everything about the Guardians: their biology, their psychology, their evolution through conflict and struggle. She paused and looked at each crew member. "Captain, we match every single description. Humans are the new Guardians. We're the only ones who can fight the Void Swarm." The ship flew through space toward home, carrying news that would change everything. Behind them, more shadow creatures emerged from the dark between stars. The ancient hunger was waking up, and only humanity stood in its way. Taman looked out at the stars and wondered if his species was ready for this responsibility. They were about to become the protectors of the entire galaxy, whether they wanted to or not. The Galactic Council chamber was huge and filled with representatives from hundreds of different worlds. Captain Taman stood in the center, feeling very small as thousands of alien eyes stared at him. Ambassador Jiang Somin stood beside him, trying to look confident even though she was nervous too. "You claim the Void Swarm is real?" asked the Threnody representative. The Threnody looked like tall trees with silver bark, and spoke in voices like wind through leaves. "Our people have told stories of shadow eaters for thousands of years, but they are just stories." Admiral Yoon Seung-ho stepped forward. He commanded the human fleet and was one of the most respected military leaders from Earth. "Show them the recordings," he told Taman. The chamber's big screens lit up with video from the dead planet. The alien representatives watched the shadow creatures move across the ground, draining life from everything they touched. Some of the aliens made worried sounds when they saw how the shadows had destroyed the Villani. "This could be fake," said a Corvan delegate. The Corvans had blue skin and 4 arms, and they were known for not trusting anyone easily. Dr. Park Minji connected her computer to the council's systems. "These are the ancient writings we found. My translation shows that the Void Swarm has attacked the galaxy before. Each time it grows stronger and hungers for more life." While the council argued, reports began coming in from across the galaxy. 3 star systems had gone completely dark in the past week. Ships sent to investigate found empty space where planets used to be. No debris, no radiation, just nothing. General Bei Jinwoo was on Earth when the first major attack began. His computer screen showed him what was happening in the Threnody home system. A massive dark shape had appeared near their sun, and it was growing larger every hour. "Send all available ships to Threnody space," he ordered. "Human ships only. The other species don't believe the threat is real yet." The UES Defiance was part of the small human fleet that arrived at the Threnody system. What they found there was worse than anything they had imagined. 12 alien warships floated dead in space, their crews gone and their hulls drained of all energy. The shadow shapes that had killed them were the size of moons. "Those things are huge," Hayeri whispered, as she piloted the Defiance toward the battle. The largest shadow creature was wrapped around the Threnody homeworld like a giant octopus, Taman could see the planet's surface turning gray and lifeless as the creature fed on everything living there. All ships, attack pattern Delta, Admiral Yoon commanded from his flagship. The human ships opened fire on the shadow creatures. To everyone's surprise, their weapons actually hurt the monsters. Where energy beams hit the shadows, pieces of darkness fell away like burning paper, but the creatures fought back. They sent waves of dark energy that drained power from the ship's systems. Alien vessels would have been destroyed instantly, but something protected the human crews. The dark energy made them feel tired and cold, but it could not kill them. Commander Kim led a team of Marines onto one of the smaller shadow creatures. They wore heavy armor and carried the most powerful weapons humanity had built. The inside of the creature was like walking through a nightmare made real. The walls around them pulsed with dark energy and whispered horrible things in languages that hurt to hear. Strange shapes moved in the shadows, trying to grab the Marines and drain their life away. "Stay together," Kim ordered his team. "Don't listen to the voices." The Marines fought their way through corridors that seemed to change shape around them. They planted explosives throughout the creature's body, timing each charge carefully. When they escaped and detonated the bombs, the entire shadow creature screamed and dissolved into empty space. The battle lasted for hours. More human ships arrived to help, including vessels commanded by Captain Onari and Colonel Han Jihyo. Together, they managed to drive the shadow creatures away from the Threnody homeworld. But the cost was terrible. Half the planet's population was gone, consumed by the creature's hunger. The survivors thanked the humans with tears in their eyes, knowing they would have lost everything without human help. Dr. Park studied the data from the battle while medical teams helped the Threnody survivors. She made an important discovery about why humans could fight the shadow creatures when other species could not. "It's our brain patterns," she explained to Admiral Yoon. "Human thoughts create a specific type of energy that disrupts the creature's feeding process. Our emotions, especially strong ones like love, anger, and determination, are like poison to them." "Why are we different?" Yoon asked. "Evolution," Park said. "Humans evolved through millions of years of conflict and struggle. Our minds learned to generate powerful emotional energy as a survival mechanism. The other species in the galaxy developed differently. They're more peaceful, which makes them easier prey for the Void Swarm." The news from the Threnody system spread quickly through the galaxy. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting and formally asked humanity to lead the fight against the Void Swarm. Ambassador Zhang accepted on behalf of Earth, but she looked worried. "We'll do everything we can," she promised the Council. "But you need to understand, we're just one species. If this threat is as large as the ancient writings suggest, we might not be enough." Her fears proved correct when intelligence reports arrived from deep space monitoring stations. The shadow creatures they had fought were just scouts. The real Void Swarm was still coming. Captain O commanded the newest human warship, the UES Guardian. It was built specifically to fight shadow creatures, with weapons designed to channel human neural patterns and shields powered by the crew's emotional energy. "Captain," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving data from the long-range sensors." The information that appeared on O's screen made her stomach feel sick. Hundreds of massive shadow creatures were moving through dark space toward the galaxy. Some were larger than gas giant planets. Behind them came something even worse, a darkness so complete that it seemed to eat light itself. "How long until they reach inhabited systems?" O asked. "At their current speed, 6 months, came the reply. O sent the data to Earth immediately. When General Bay saw the numbers, he realized the horrible truth. The small human fleet that had saved the Threnody was nothing compared to what was coming. Even if every human ship in the galaxy worked together, they would be outnumbered by thousands to one. The war for the galaxy was about to begin, and humanity was the only thing standing between civilization and the hungry darkness. But the shadow creatures were learning from each battle, adapting to human resistance. Taman met with his crew on the Defiance to discuss their next mission. They would join the human fleets gathering at strategic points across the galaxy, preparing for the greatest battle in galactic history. "Are we really strong enough for this?" Yeri asked quietly. Taman looked at his young pilot and tried to sound confident. "We have to be. There's no one else." Outside the ship's windows, the stars seemed dimmer than before, as if something was already beginning to consume their light. The human fleet grew larger every week as ships arrived from Earth and the colonies. Admiral Yoon watched from his command ship as new vessels took their positions in the defensive line. They were brave ships with brave crews, but he knew they would not be enough. Dr. Kang Minho worked day and night in his laboratory, studying pieces of destroyed shadow creatures. He was trying to understand how they worked so humans could fight them better. What he found made him worry more each day. "The creatures are changing," he told Captain O during one of their meetings. "Each time we fight them, they learn something new. The weapons that worked last month are less effective now." O looked at the data on Kang's computer screen. "How much time do we have before they become immune to our attacks?" "Maybe 6 months," Kang said quietly. "After that, our advantages will be gone." The war had already spread to dozens of star systems. Human ships fought desperate battles against shadow creatures that grew smarter and stronger with each encounter. The crews were exhausted from constant fighting, but they could not stop. Too many innocent lives depended on them. Colonel Han Jihyo led the most dangerous missions. She commanded special teams of humans who had volunteered for experimental treatments. These treatments used ancient Guardian technology found in ruins across the galaxy. The enhanced soldiers could fight shadow creatures face to face, something that was impossible for normal humans. But the process was dangerous. Many volunteers died during the treatments, and those who survived were changed forever. "The enhancement works," Han explained to General Bay during a video call. "But it's killing more people than it saves. We need a better way." Captain Taemin was fighting his own battles in the Outer Rim systems. The Defiance had become famous throughout the galaxy as the ship that first discovered the Void Swarm threat. Other species looked to Taemin and his crew as symbols of hope. "Captain, we have a distress call from the Zelhari homeworld," Hyeri reported from her pilot station. The Zelhari were peaceful beings who looked like giant butterflies with rainbow wings. They had never fought a war in their entire history and had no idea how to defend themselves against shadow creatures. "Set course for Zelhari space," Taemin ordered. "Maximum speed." The journey took 2 days, but when they arrived, the Defiance was already too late. Shadow creatures the size of mountains were feeding on the planet's surface. The beautiful crystal cities of the Zelhari were turning black and empty. Taemin's small ship could not fight creatures so large, but he could still save lives. The Defiance landed near the largest Zelhari city and began evacuating survivors. Dr. Park used her knowledge of ancient languages to communicate with the terrified aliens. "We need to go now," she told the Zelhari leaders. "More shadow creatures are coming." As they loaded the last group of survivors onto evacuation ships, Taemin noticed something that made his blood run cold. The shadow creatures were not just randomly destroying everything. They were studying the human rescue efforts, learning how humans moved and fought. "They're getting smarter," he told Commander Kim. "Look at how they're positioning themselves. They're trying to cut off our escape routes." Kim saw it too. The creatures were adapting their tactics in real time, becoming more effective predators with each passing hour. The evacuation succeeded, but barely. As the Defiance escaped the dying system, Taemin sent an urgent message to Admiral Yoon. The enemy was evolving faster than anyone had expected. Meanwhile, the largest battle of the war was building around the Nexus Gate, a crucial hyperspace junction that connected dozens of star systems. If the shadow creatures captured it, they could spread throughout the galaxy much faster. Admiral Yoon assembled every human ship he could find for the defense of Nexus Gate. Over 200 vessels gathered in formation, representing nearly 60% of humanity's space forces. "This is our line in the sand," Yoon told his fleet commanders. "If we lose here, the inner systems will fall within weeks." The shadow creatures that attacked Nexus Gate were different from any they had fought before. These monsters were organized and tactical, working together like a military force rather than hungry animals. Captain O commanded the Guardian during the battle. Her ship was equipped with the newest anti-void weapons, but even those seemed less effective than before. The Adi creatures had adapted to resist human technology. "Target the largest one," O ordered her weapons officer. Full power to main guns. The Guardian's energy beams struck the shadow creature, but instead of dissolving, it only flinched and kept coming. Other human ships focused their fire on the same target, and together they managed to destroy it. But it took much longer than expected. The battle lasted 18 hours. Human crews fought without rest, pouring everything they had into holding the line. They succeeded in saving Nexus Gate, but the cost was terrible. When the shadow creatures finally retreated, Admiral Yoon counted his losses. Nearly 60% of his fleet was gone, including many of his most experienced captains. The survivors were exhausted and their ships were badly damaged. "We can't keep fighting like this," General Bai told Yoon during their emergency conference. "We're losing too many ships and people." Dr. Kang had been studying the battle data, and what he found was even worse news. "The creatures are definitely becoming immune to our attacks," he reported. "At this rate, we have maybe 2 months before they're completely resistant to human weapons." But Kang had also made another discovery, one that terrified him so much he almost did not want to share it. He had found records of what happened to the original Guardians, the ancient race that first fought the Void Swarm. The Guardians didn't just defeat the enemy, he told the military leaders. They had to sacrifice their entire species to create a prison strong enough to hold the Void Swarm. Every single Guardian gave up their individual existence to become part of a living barrier. The room fell silent as everyone understood what this meant. If the current barrier was failing and the Void Swarm was escaping, humanity might face the same choice the Guardians had made long ago. "There has to be another way," Ambassador Zhang said, but her voice did not sound confident. Dr. Park had been working with engineers to develop new weapons and defenses, but progress was slow. The shadow creatures adapted faster than humans could innovate. As reports came in from across the galaxy, the situation looked worse every day. More star systems were going dark and the main Void Swarm force was still approaching. Intelligence estimated that the largest creatures would reach inhabited space within 3 months. Taman received new orders to join the main fleet near Earth. As the Defiance traveled through hyperspace, he thought about everything that had happened since they found the dead Villani planet. "Do you think we can win?" Yeri asked him privately. Taman looked at his young pilot and wished he could give her a hopeful answer. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But we have to try. Everyone in the galaxy is depending on us." The weight of that responsibility felt heavier every day. Humanity had become the galaxy's protectors, not by choice, but by necessity. They were the only species capable of fighting the shadow creatures, but they were still just one world against an enemy that had consumed entire civilizations. As Earth appeared on their screens, Taman wondered if his home planet would survive the coming war. The final battle was approaching and humanity would either find a way to victory or become the Void Swarm's next meal. Dr. Kang stood in his laboratory, staring at the ancient Guardian text that Dr. Park had helped him translate. The words on the screen told a story of sacrifice that made him feel sick to his stomach. He had called this meeting because everyone needed to know the truth. The original Guardians had no choice, he explained to the group of military leaders and scientists gathered around his computer. When they realized they could not defeat the Void Swarm through normal warfare, they performed something called the Great Binding. Admiral Yoon leaned forward in his chair. "What exactly did they do?" "They transformed themselves into pure energy," Kang continued. "Every Guardian in their entire species gave up their physical form to create a living prison around the Void Swarm's home dimension. They became the barrier that has kept these creatures trapped for millions of years." General Bay's face went pale. "And now that barrier is failing." "Yes," Kang said quietly. "The prison is breaking down, which is why the shadow creatures are escaping. If we don't repair it soon, the entire Void Swarm will be free to consume the galaxy." Captain Ryu Sun-hee commanded the evacuation fleet that was moving civilians away from the most dangerous areas. She had been listening to the conversation through video link from her ship. "Are you saying we have to die to save everyone else?" "That's what the Guardians did," Kang replied. "But I've been working with Engineer Lim on a different solution." Engineer Lim Daeho had been quiet during most of the meeting, but now he stepped forward. He was young for such an important position, but he understood Guardian technology better than anyone else alive. We call it the Genesis Protocol, Lim explained. Instead of sacrificing our entire species, we can modify the Guardian process. It would still require transformation, but humans could survive it. Dr. Park looked interested. How would it work? One person volunteers to become the focal point of a new barrier, Lim said. They would merge their consciousness with Guardian technology to create a control system for the prison. The volunteer would live forever, but they would be bound to the duty of keeping the void swarm contained. That's still asking someone to give up their life, Ambassador Jang pointed out. Not their life, Lim corrected. Their freedom. The volunteer would remain conscious and aware, but they could never leave their post. They would become a permanent guardian, watching over the galaxy for eternity. While they debated the Genesis Protocol, the war continued to go badly. The shadow creatures had become much more dangerous. Human weapons barely hurt them anymore, and their attacks were more coordinated than ever before. Colonel Han led her enhanced soldiers in a desperate attack on a shadow creature mothership near the Mars system. These were the largest creatures yet seen, the size of small moons and covered with thousands of smaller shadow beings. Remember your training, Han told her team as they prepared for the assault. Stay together, and don't let the voices in your head distract you. The enhanced soldiers could survive inside the shadow creatures longer than normal humans, but it was still extremely dangerous. The creatures' interiors were like living nightmares, filled with whispers that tried to drive people insane. Han's team fought through corridors made of pure darkness using weapons powered by their own life energy. They planted charges throughout the creature's vital organs, timing each explosion carefully. But as they tried to escape, Han realized something horrible. The shadow creature was not trying to stop them from planting the bombs. It was studying how they worked, learning about human tactics and technology. It's a trap, she radioed to her team. The creature is letting us do this so it can learn from us. They managed to escape before the charges exploded, but Han knew the victory was meaningless. The shadow creatures were using human attacks as learning opportunities, becoming smarter and deadlier with each battle. Captain O fought her own desperate battle near Jupiter, where 3 massive shadow creatures were trying to drain energy from the gas giant itself. If they succeeded, they would have enough power to create hundreds of smaller creatures. The Guardian and a dozen other human ships attacked the creatures with everything they had, but their weapons seemed to have almost no effect. The shadow monsters had become nearly immune to human technology. Captain, her science officer reported, the creatures are adapting faster than we predicted. Our weapons are now only 10% effective. O watched in horror as one of the shadow creatures reached toward her ship with a tentacle made of pure darkness. The Guardian's shields held, but barely. She could feel the creature trying to drain the life from her crew. On Earth, Private Shin Wubin was studying the same Guardian text that had worried Dr. Kang so much. Shin was only 20 years old, but he had a gift for understanding ancient languages and had been assigned to help with translation work. There's something here that everyone missed, he told Dr. Park during one of their research sessions. Look at this section about the Eternal Watch. Park read the text that Shin had found. Her eyes grew wide as she understood what it meant. This changes everything, she whispered. According to the ancient writings, the Guardians had tried a different approach before resorting to the Great Binding. They had attempted something called the Eternal Watch, where the entire Guardian species shared the burden of maintaining the prison. Instead of one person sacrificing everything, Shin explained excitedly, every Guardian contributed a small part of their life energy to power the barrier. They lived shorter lives, but they remained. Free and the prison stayed strong. Park contacted the other scientists immediately. If they could adapt the Eternal Watch to work with humans, it might be possible to save the galaxy without anyone having to sacrifice their individual existence. But time was running out. Reports from deep space showed that the main void swarm force was almost within striking distance of the inner star systems. The largest creatures were beyond anything humans had fought before. Some were bigger than entire planets. Captain Taman received orders to join the final defensive line around Earth's solar system. Every human ship in the galaxy was being called home for humanity's last stand. "This is it," he told his crew as the Defiance approached Earth. "If we lose here, there's nowhere else to run." The space around Earth was filled with human ships, but there were far fewer than there should have been. Too many had been lost in the fighting across the galaxy. Admiral Yoon's fleet was less than half the size it had been at the beginning of the war. Engineer Lim worked frantically to prepare the Genesis Protocol, even as Private Shin and Dr. Park tried to develop the Eternal Watch alternative. Both plans required technology that had never been tested, and there was no time for proper experiments. "We need a volunteer for the Genesis Protocol," General Bay announced to the fleet commanders. "Someone has to be ready to make the sacrifice if the Eternal Watch doesn't work." Captain Taman stepped forward without hesitation. "I'll do it," he said simply. "Captain, no," Yeri protested. "There has to be another way." Taman looked at his young pilot with sad eyes. "Someone has to be willing. If my sacrifice can save everyone else, it's worth it." But Private Shin had been working on something that might change everything. He had found references to a combination approach, using elements of both the Great Binding and the Eternal Watch to create a solution that could save both humanity and the galaxy. "I think I know how to make this work," he told the assembled leaders. "But we'll need every human in the galaxy to participate voluntarily. No one can be forced to join." As the largest shadow creatures entered the solar system, humanity prepared for the final battle. They had two possible plans and very little time to choose between them. The fate of the galaxy rested on the shoulders of one young species that had become protectors not by choice, but by the simple fact that they were the only ones who could fight the darkness. The largest shadow creature that humanity had ever seen emerged from the darkness between stars. It was called the Hunger of Stars, and it was bigger than Jupiter. As it moved through space toward Earth, planets trembled and stars dimmed in its presence. Private Shin worked desperately on his computer, trying to combine the ancient Guardian technologies before it was too late. Dr. Park and Engineer Lim helped him, checking his calculations and building the devices they would need. "The Eternal Watch can work," Shin explained to Admiral Yoon. "But every human in the galaxy has to choose to participate. We can't force anyone." "How do we contact every human?" Yoon asked. "There are colonies on thousands of worlds." "We use the emergency broadcast system," Dr. Park suggested. "Every human ship and settlement receives those signals." Captain Taman prepared the Defiance for what might be their final battle. His crew worked quietly at their stations, checking weapons and shields. Everyone knew they were probably going to die, but no one complained. "Captain," Yeri said softly, "if this doesn't work, I want you to know that I'm proud to serve with you." Tamin smiled at his young pilot. "We're not dead yet, Yeri. And if Shin is right, we might all survive this." The first wave of shadow creatures reached Earth's outer defenses. Human ships opened fire with everything they had, but their weapons barely scratched the massive enemies. The creatures were now almost completely immune to human technology. Captain O commanded the Guardian in a desperate attack on one of the smaller shadow creatures. Even though it was smaller, it was still the size of Earth's moon. Her ship's weapons did almost nothing to hurt it. "All ships fall back to the inner defense line," Admiral Yoon ordered. "We can't stop them with weapons anymore." On Earth, General Bay activated the emergency broadcast system. His voice reached every human settlement in the galaxy, from the Mao, smallest research station, to the largest colony world. "This is General Bay speaking to all humans everywhere," he said. "Our species faces a choice that will determine the fate of the entire galaxy. Private Shin has discovered a way to save everyone, but it requires all of us to work together." Shin took over the broadcast to explain his plan. The ancient Guardians found a way to share the burden of protecting the galaxy. Instead of one person sacrificing everything, every human can contribute a small part of their life energy to create a new prison for the Void Swarm. He paused, knowing how difficult his next words would be. "If you choose to participate, you will live a shorter life than normal. But you will remain free, and your children will inherit the ability to help protect the galaxy." This is not just about saving ourselves, it's about becoming something more than human. The broadcast reached millions of humans across the galaxy. On colony worlds, in space stations, aboard ships fleeing from shadow creatures, people listened to Shin's words and made their choice. The response was overwhelming. From every corner of human space, the answer came back the same. Yes. Farmers on agricultural worlds, scientists in research labs, soldiers fighting desperate battles, children too young to fully understand what was happening, all of them agreed to join the Eternal Watch. Engineer Lim activated the Guardian technology that he and Shin had built. Ancient machines, powered by human determination, began to connect the consciousness of every willing human into a single network. The effect was immediate and profound. Across the galaxy, humans felt a new connection to each other and to the cosmic forces that shaped reality. They could sense the shadow creature's hunger and the weakness in the ancient prison that held the Void Swarm. Captain Taman felt the change as it happened. One moment he was just himself, and the next he was connected to every other human alive. He could feel Hieri's courage, Dr. Park's wisdom, Commander Kim's protective instincts. He could sense millions of other humans, all united in purpose. "It's working," Dr. Park reported from her station. "The network is stable and we're generating the energy patterns we need." The hunger of stars reached Earth's inner system, and the final battle began. But this time, the human ships fought differently. Instead of relying on weapons that no longer worked, they channeled the collective will of their entire species. Ships began to glow with a soft light that hurt the shadow creatures just to look at. When human vessels moved, they left trails of energy that the creatures could not cross. The very presence of humans in space became a weapon against the Void Swarm. Captain O led her ship directly toward the hunger of stars. The massive creature tried to drain the life from her crew, but the Eternal Watch protected them. The combined life force of millions of humans was too strong for even this ancient horror to consume. "All ships, focus on the largest creature," Admiral Yoon commanded. "We end this now." The human fleet converged on the hunger of stars. As they approached, their ship's energy signatures combined into something that had never existed before. The focused will of an entire species united in protection of all life. The shadow creature tried to fight back, but it was too late. The energy generated by the Eternal Watch wrapped around it like chains made of starlight. The creature screamed across dimensions as it was pulled back into the prison that had held it for so long. One by one, the other shadow creatures were captured and dragged back into the void between dimensions. The prison was not just repaired. It was stronger than ever before, powered by human determination and maintained by human sacrifice. When the last shadow creature disappeared, the galaxy fell silent. The immediate threat was over, but everyone knew that everything had changed forever. Humans were no longer just another species among many. They had become something new, guardians of the galaxy, connected to cosmic forces beyond normal understanding. They could sense threats that other species could not detect, and they had the power to respond to dangers that came from the dark spaces between stars. 50 years later, Admiral Taman stood on the bridge of the Guardian Station, built around the dimensional anchor that maintained the Void Swarm's prison. He was older now, his hair gray and his face lined with years of responsibility, but his eyes still held the same determination they had shown during the war. Dr. Park, now the galaxy's leading expert on cosmic threats, worked beside him. They monitored the prison's energy levels and watched for signs of new dangers emerging from the darkness. The galaxy had indeed entered a golden age under human protection. Other species lived in peace, knowing that humanity stood watch against threats they could not imagine. Trade flourished, art and science advanced, and wars between civilized species became almost unknown. But the humans paid a price for their role as protectors. They lived shorter lives than they once had, their life energy constantly flowing into the network that maintained galactic security. Their children were born with an instinctive understanding of their duty, able to sense cosmic imbalances from birth. Young guardians trained from childhood to respond to threats that emerged from the void. They learned to pilot ships that were powered by human will and to fight enemies that existed in dimensions beyond normal space. Captain Hieri, now a senior Guardian commander, led training missions for new recruits. She taught them that being a protector was both an honor and a burden. They had the power to save entire civilizations, but they could never rest or let their guard down. Remember, she told her students, we are the shield between light and darkness. Every life in the galaxy depends on us staying strong. The other species had initially been grateful for human protection, but as years passed, they began to take it for granted. They built their civilizations knowing that humans would always be there to protect them from cosmic threats. Some humans worried about this attitude, but Taman had made peace with it long ago. It doesn't matter if they remember to thank us, he told his officers. We don't do this for gratitude. We do it because it's right. On his final day of service, as Taman prepared to retire and pass command to the next generation, new alarms sounded in the Guardian station. Deep space sensors had detected stirrings in the dark between galaxies, entities even older and stranger than the Void Swarm. Taman looked at the data with tired but determined eyes. The work was never finished. There would always be new threats, new challenges for humanity to face as the galaxy's protectors. A young Guardian approached his station, barely 18 years old, but already glowing with the inner light that marked all human defenders. Admiral, should we investigate the signals? Taman smiled and nodded. Send a scout ship. We need to know what we're dealing with. As the young Guardian hurried to carry out his orders, Taman thought about the choice his species had made 50 years ago. They had become protectors not by seeking power but by accepting responsibility. They had traded normal lives for the duty of keeping the galaxy safe. He looked out through the station's windows at the stars that humanity now guarded. Somewhere out there, new families were being born. New civilizations were growing. New dreams were taking shape, all protected by human sacrifice and human determination. The galaxy slept peacefully under humanity's watch, never knowing how close the darkness always was or how much their protectors gave up to keep the light burning bright.